Hello, hello, good morning. It's Monica from Life is Art, and this is the Saturday 10 a.m. technique at the Canada's Big Landmarks online crop. And we are having lots of fun. We're exploring Canada from west coast to east coast, and we are checking out the big landmarks that we pass along the way. Although, if you looked at the places we've been, they're not in order. Like if we drove down the road, it would end up looking like a spider's web if we followed the order I've been posting them. But that's okay. It's all made up and the points don't matter, I guess is how you can look at it. So we are going to be doing an interesting thing today. You'll notice that my camera is way up high, and we're going to be creating a double page layout that involves only cardstock and photos. And we're going to be turning negatives into positives. And you hear that a lot in life, if life gives you lemons, make lemonade, where you take a negative, although lemons are nice, you take a negative and you make it into a positive. And that can be true in crafting too. And if you're into photography, you know that negatives get made into positive things because your film, back in the day when we had film, your negatives get turned into your photos. So for our scrapbook layout today, I wanted to show creating something, and actually I'm not going to stick down this second piece just yet. I'm going to just set it aside. We're going to be creating something that I have done a few times for different things, mostly actually for cards, not actually for a layout. And because I do not use a Cricut or a Silhouette or any of those kind of electronic cutting machines, there are some techniques out there that are just a little bit hard to do if you're using paper and scissors and glue and a ruler and a pencil. But you can still create some very cool things with your paper, scissors, and glue and whatnot. And this is also something fun that, say you're at a crop or retreat and you don't have your machine with you, you can still create something. So I thought I would show you, for those of you like me who don't use those machines, how to create sort of an overlay that that you can use to make something a little bit different for your scrapbook. Okay, so we're just going to be using cardstock. I've got basic white for my pages, but really you're probably not going to see any of the basic white by the time I'm done. Then I'm going to be using two cardstock colors. I'm going to be using cherry cobbler and crushed curry, and it kind of looks like mustard and ketchup. That wasn't what I was going for, but my daughter recently participated in a live art competition in Brampton, and it's an annual event. And so this was the first year she could compete because of her age. And she was competing in the youth category because she was 13. It starts from 13 to 17 in the youth category, and then the adult category is 18 plus. And so it was hosted by Gallery 35 and also a sort of giftware store here in Brampton. For some reason, I can't think of the name. This was sort of the schedule for the day. She had to apply to participate, although anybody could sign up. And there were awards and things, and it was a 2-day event. The first day was going and competing and being out in the community and within a certain geographical area in downtown Brampton and creating some art from what they saw around them. And then a few weeks later, they went back and there was an award ceremony. So they had judges that were selecting the pieces that were going to place first, second, third in each category. Now, she was one of the finalists in the youth category. She did not place in first, second, or third, but she really enjoyed the competition. She thought it was a lot of fun, something she had never tried before, especially trying to create art in a short time. They had 3 hours. And normally she's one of those artists that sort of takes her time and, you know, lingers over her art. So that was kind of a different experience for her. She loved it. She wants to compete again next year. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to end up making layouts probably every year that she participates. So I thought this year, let's start out with something a little bit different. So I've got the schedule of the events. I've got a whole bunch of photos. My son Joshua went with her on the day of the competition to help her, because you have to bring your own easel and chair and a drop cloth to protect the sidewalk or the ground around you. You had to have your paints, your water, all those things. Plus the weather was supposed to be bad. In fact, they ended up with thunderstorms and had to go inside. And he was there because she's only 13. So we're not going to let her wander around downtown Brampton by herself at 13. So he's in some of the pictures, but he also took some pictures for me, which was awesome. And so what I have got here is I have a strip of paper that is 12 inches by 4 inches. One of each of my 2 colors, crushed curry and the cherry cobbler. And what I want to do is I want to create a negative word, but not a negative word. I don't want to be negative, but I want to create the negative space of a word. And so the word I'm going to use, I'm going to have words going across the top and across the bottom. I'm going to have Live Art Comp 2024. And I think that will be a great page to showcase the photos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line my paper up here, because I'm going to flip it over actually. I'm going to have to do some drawing with my ruler and my pencil. Now, the word live in the font that I'm going to create it in is all straight lines. So that's already making it a little bit easier. Then you have to do a little bit of math to figure out how wide the letters are that you want to create. So what I discovered is that if I mark off 1/4 of an inch on each end, so we're going to do this. You're going to see me, just like she made live art, you're going to watch me create this title. So we're going to mark 1/4 of an inch from top to bottom at each end. And that's going to be negative space. Okay, that's not a letter. It's just negative space. And then I discovered in the word live, we have 4 letters. And if I make each of my letters 2.5 inches wide, I can get 4 letters across with 1/2 inch of space in between each. I did the math. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to mark off 2.5 inches. So we're at 1/4 of an inch. So we're going to go to 1 1/4, 2 1/4, 2 3/4, and that will give us our 2.5. Okay. And then we're going to leave a 1/2 inch space, and we're going to mark all of this because again, we're working on the back side of our cardstock. And so we're never going to see it. Then we're going to mark, and that was at 3 1/4. Now we're going to go from 3 1/4, 4 1/4, 5 1/4, 5 3/4, and that gives us our next 2.5 inch word. And I'm using my mat to help me line my ruler up. Then we're going to leave a 1/2 inch space. Then we're going to mark off another 2.5 inches. So at 3 3/4, and then another 1/2 inch space. Now, because we are working on the back side, we can't just write our word out. We need to do it in reverse. Now, in the past, growing up, we have to make presentations for science fairs and all this stuff. I have actually learned how to write script backwards and make like puffy letters and all that kind of stuff. This is a little bit more simple because we're doing straight lines. So we're going to have our first letter over on the right, and it's going to be reversed. So we're going to have an L. In order to make my L, you know what? I think we're really far over here. So I'm actually going to move over and line myself up so that my 2.5 inch letter is right here, because I still need to use my grid lines. So I'm just going to put it, oops, I have adhesive on that other page. Let me move that other page out of the way. Because remember, I stuck some adhesive on there so I could stick it down. We'll scooch it out of the way. Alrighty. So we've lined up here in this first 2.5 inch space. I want my letters to have an inch thickness to them. So each line of my letter is going to be an inch thick. So normally you would write an L straight down and to the right. We're going to go straight down and to the left. So I need to mark 1 inch in from the left where I've marked off that 1/4 inch. So I'm going to come an inch from that and make a line. Okay. And then I need to come an inch up from the bottom. Okay, so now you can see I have my L going backwards. Let me just lift that up so you can see my L. So if I flip this over, this will be my L shape. Okay, you got it? You wrapped your head around it? Good. Okay, now I have a little bit of something different going on here with this particular word, and I just remembered about it. And that is that my eye is narrower. And I forgot about that because my eye is not going to be 2.5 inches wide. It's just going to be a 1 inch strip. So I forgot about that, and I actually need to shift my things. So I'm going to start again. This is why I had an extra piece, because I knew I would do that. Because I'm narrowing down my eye, I actually need to leave, let me just double check, because yes, I need, instead of a 1/4 inch on the edges, I need to leave a whole inch. I knew that I would make that mistake. I told myself that earlier. So let's just quickly change that from a 1/4 inch to 1 inch. So you need to adjust for weird letters, okay? So now we're going to mark off 2.5. And this is why it helps to do it in pencil. If I hadn't already cut another piece, I could just use my eraser and fix that. 2.5, 1/2 inch. And now this one's going to be 1 inch, 1/2 inch. And then we should have 2.5. Okay, there we go. We have compensated. All right, let's do our L again. All we needed to do was to narrow down the whole thing. So we just added an extra 3/4 inch on either side because our eye is only 1 inch wide and we were leaving 2.5 inch space. So the difference between 1 inch and 2.5 is 1.5 inches, which divided in half gives us 3/4 inch. We already had a 1/4 inch. We added the 3/4, and that gives us a whole inch on the side, just in case you're one of those people who need to know the math. All right. Another way you can do this, which involves less math, I'm just doing my L again. We already talked about that. 1 inch in and 1 inch up. Is to go to a store that has stencil letters. And you can just trace your stencil letters. That is also another option. So there we have our L, and I'm actually going to write the L. Then we have our I, and it's already done. Okay, we don't need to do anything with the I. Then we're going to do the letter V. So let's line ourselves up with our spot here. Now a V is nice because it works either way, right? There's no front or back, or forwards and backwards. So what we need to do is we need to mark in 1 inch from this side, 1 inch from this side, because our letters are 1 inch thick. The center at the bottom, we're going to mark it, is at 1.25 inch in from the outside line. And then we're going to mark 1/2 inch to the left and 1/2 inch to the right, and that will give us a 1 inch thickness. And then all we have to do is draw a line from this top line to that first mark, right? That gives us the angle for our V. And then from this outside line to that outside mark in the center. Okay, and then we need to make the little notch in the center. And the way to do that is to actually join the mark that's 1 inch in at the top with the bottom of our V on the right hand side. And that will give us a straight 1 inch line all the way down. We don't need to go all the way down though, because that's not necessary. Then we're going to do the same thing the other angle. You're basically making a parallel line with the first line that you made. And so we're going to join from our mark to the left-hand side of the bottom of our V, like that. Okay, so now this is our letter V. I'm just marking it there. This is our letter V, and we're going to cut that notch out of the top. Okay, and then we need to do the letter E. Now this is a little bit trickier because we're doing it backwards. So the upright of the E is going to be on the right hand side. So we're going to mark 1 inch for the upright part of our E. Now we need to make the 3 horizontal E's. Good morning, Allison. How are you? I've got 2 Allisons on. And then we need to do our horizontals. So we're 4 inches tall. And I'm going to scooch over just a little bit so that I can see the markings on both sides. We're 4 inches tall. So our center is at 2 inches right there. And we're making each of our lines of our letters 1 inch thick. So the center of our E needs to be 1/2 inch down from the center, right there, and 1/2 inch up from the center. You just kind of think about it. And then we're going to come 1 inch down from the top, like that, and then 1 inch up from the bottom. And what will happen is you will end up with a 1/2 inch gap in between. Okay, so there's the upright for our E, and then we have the 3 pieces that go out. Then this is the fun part. We get to cut it. Okay, so let's grab our scissors. And what we are going to throw away is actually the letters, the L, the I, the V, and the E. We're going to throw those away. We want to keep the negative space. So we're going to keep the outside bits. So what that means is I'm going to cut this first strip, the outside piece of the back of my L. Okay. And that is going to flip over and go here on the outside of my page. Then I'm going to cut out my L. And sometimes it's easier if you turn it this way and that. I'm going to cut out my L. Like so. And you want to follow those lines because remember, we're keeping the negative space. So we don't want to just, cut across the middle of that. The L is what we're not keeping. Now we have our I. So you see how we've marked off the 1/2 inch gap in between? We're not removing that separately from this. This whole piece is going to stay together. And we're going to go to the line of the I. Like this. Okay. And that's going to stick down there like that. So now you can see that our L becomes a blank space and we're using the negatives around the letter. Does it make sense now? Is it coming together? Now we're going to cut out the I. And of course you can keep these letters. You can use them for something else. You don't have to throw them away. There's our I. Now we need the gap in between the letter and the angle of our V all as one piece because we're cutting out the V and keeping the negative space all together. And you have to keep reminding yourself of that because we're so used to cutting on the line that we're going to leave the gap of 1 inch for our eye. We're so used to cutting on the lines that we have a tendency to try and cut all of these lines. You have to remind yourself. So we're going to cut the angle of the V like that. And we need to cut out our little triangle because we're going to use that. That's our negative space. So there's our little V triangle. We'll set our letter aside and flip that over. Stick that on there. Now, I know this seems like it's a long process, and yes, it probably is. So now we're cutting up the back of the E. We've kept our gap and our angle all as one piece, and that's going to go here. Can you see that word coming together? And now we need to cut the negative space on the outside plus the bits that are going inside the E. And you have to be careful because we're keeping the negative space that you don't overshoot, right? It would be so easy just to go on past, but you need to carefully cut out that letter because we're keeping what normally would be the throwaway piece. And then you will see the magic that's going to happen, because what we're going to do is in the space where the letters were, we're going to put some photos. And you have to kind of be picky and choosy with your photos. Okay, so there's our E, and there we go. Okay, so now let's grab some photos that we're going to stick on here. And I chose carefully some photos for this. So this first picture was one that Joshua took, and Julie is standing in front of a garden, probably in Gage Park, and it was before the rain started pouring down, or it might have been in between the rain pouring down. So I thought that this one would look great behind the L. So let's grab some adhesive. And this one of Julia standing so nice and tall is going to fit inside that eye. This is why we have stuck down our base page. Oh, can't grab the backing. Because we need to make sure nothing moves. Now, we're keeping in mind that we have an inch gap on the left side, and it comes across to 3.5 for that letter. So I have just enough space, I think, to get my photo in there without any weirdness showing. Then I can go ahead and stick down my negative space from my letters. Now, if you're a person who uses an electric cutting machine, you can probably set up a thing, because I've seen lots of people make fun overlays, and you can set up a thing and have it cut it all out, and you just plop it on top. This is the method for those of us who don't do that. Okay? And I think it's kind of a fun skill to have, to be able to think backwards and to be able to think outside the word. So we want to have an inch in between, because our letters were an inch wide. There we go. I did that a bit crooked. We're going to... The problem is I'm working so far away from myself. Let me fix it. I don't want it to be crooked because I want it to turn out. Of course I stuck it down good, and of course the paper wants to tear. The photo is going to be okay. It's the paper. Okay, come on. Let's go. There we go. let's line it up down here so I can see my 1 inch. When you're doing this not on a live video, you can, of course, and I'm not going to stick it down on the other side because I'm going to need to tuck a photo in there. Let's put ourselves back into place. There we go. Okay, what did I do with the other photo? I have now lost a photo. How did I manage that? Did anybody see where I put the photo? Maybe I knocked it on the floor. Oh dear. I have lost the photo of Julia that was going to go in this space. Let me see. It couldn't have gone too far. Stuck to my sleeve. Is it on the floor? Oh dear. Always during a live video. Okay, we're going to leave the gap. And hopefully we'll discover it. Now, for the V, I have this photo of Julia doing some art. So she was actually painting the front railing with flowers and the front entrance to City Hall. All right, so we want to have our photo at 5.5, 6.5, 7.5, 5. We want it right about there. And then we can stick this down, and I'm going to just put adhesive on one side because I'm going to have to tuck that photo in when we discover it. Check under the white sheet. Maybe the white sheet I moved? Nope. 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 It's gone. It disappeared. This one's not sticking very well. Okay, so we're going to line this up at 5 inches. There we go. And then we're going to put the other side. And we're going to put our, I'll do that after. Our last photo across here is Julia standing in front of her completed artwork at the gallery. So you got to kind of pick and choose your photos because they're going to have to fit within the letters. And so that's what I kind of worked on. So we're going to come 1 inch in. I tried to find photos that would match with what we needed for the shapes of the letters. So this works best for an event where you have lots and lots of photos, okay? Now we got 11, 5.5, 6.5, 7.5, 8, 8.5. This is all the mental math, right? Oh. There we go. Line that up. And let's put the point of our V on. When you're cutting out ones that have really big points like that, you're going to want to just make sure that it stays nice and straight. Okay, so we're going to go right between the 6.5 and the 7 on this. My head is probably in the camera because I'm trying desperately to see where I'm going. So you can see there, I made sure that her face was going to be on the side, and then her easel was over there. And let's scooch these out of the way. Wonder what I did with that photo. That is just terribly odd. I had it in my hand. So weird. I will find it eventually. Okay, then our last piece, which I threw away, is going down here. Oh no, that's not our last piece. This is our last piece. Got myself flustered. This is our E. So we're going to add our adhesive. And this one, I made sure that her head was above where the horizontals were, or within the horizontal. Because, you know, you don't want to chop off somebody's head, especially if they're the subject of the photo, right? So let's stick that down. There we go. So isn't that cool? Now, I don't want to make you have to sit through me doing all of that for all of my things. But I will tell you that when you're trying to make a rounded letter, if you don't have a tool that helps you create a curve, there's some things that you can use instead. And one of the things is, you see this tape that I'm using? When you're all finished using it, and even probably the Terran tape, it's got a cardboard center. This one has a plastic center. So if you're trying to create a curve, and it's smaller than this, so say we are trying to get a curve inside 2.5 inches, all I did was I took this one end and I pinched it so that this end is still just a natural curve. I pinched it so I was down to 2.5 inches and I just traced around it. Okay, so there's lots of ways you can create that look. So let's finish adding our photos over here. I've already cut out the letters for the word comp. So let's go ahead and stick these down. Now, comp was a 4-letter word as well, but it was, all the letters were the same size. So instead of having the 1 inch gap, right, our 1/4 inch plus our 3/4 inch to make up for the thinness of the eye, I only have the 1/4 inch on each side. So I need to remember that when I'm putting my photos down, that I've got a 1/4 inch on the outside. And then we're going to come to 2 3/4. So I want my photo to fit within those parameters. Then I've got my outside bit here. I'm actually going to use some liquid glue for this because it's got those pointy little bits around the letter C. And sometimes you have to make your letters a little bit stylized. And I will show you how I did that with the letter C. We're going to stick this down. So that's the curve. And then our next photo I've got is sort of Julia over her shoulder while she was painting. This one was her art on the easel at the competition once it was done. Now, she says that she would have preferred to have more time, of course, but that's par for the course. Okay, so we've come in 2 3/4, 1/2 inch gap. So this one basically is just going to line up with that last one, like so. And then in the gap in between, for my C, instead of coming in and making the big oval, because that would take up a lot of room, I just made the coming in part, right? Just the 1 inch in, and it's stylized that way. So you can adjust your letters so that you get maximum photo visibility, right? And so I used that center of my glue to create that look. All right, so 2 3/4. Right about there. All right, and then my next photo I have is again over Julia's shoulder, but this was right at the beginning when she was just sort of sketching out her idea. I did try at first to sort of have a progression of the photos, you know, from the start of the day to the end of the day. But when you're making letters, you got to kind of work around the shape of the letters. Hey, Mom, nice to see you're watching. All right, so we have 1/2 inch, and then 1, 2 1/2, 1/2 inch, 1, 2 1/2, 1/2 inch, and let's make sure. Yep, right about there. We want to make sure we get our photo in the right spot. If you're doing this on your own layout, you can even mark out where things are going to go, you know, right on your base page, because everything gets covered up, right? You don't have to, no need to guess. And I think this one is slightly off, but we're going to leave it because it's stuck down. And then my last photo is of Julia just standing beside a piece of artwork at the gallery. And we're going to stick this down. Pretty much on the edge. There we go. Then we have our 1/2 inch piece that marks off our M, the edge of our M. Now, to make sure we get it in the right spot, let's do the math. 1/4 inch, and then 1, 2 1/2, right there. It would probably be helpful to be using a ruler to make sure I get things lined up. When I was preparing for this, I had it just sitting on my mat, so of course I had all the lovely grid lines showing through, but you know, when you're putting it on a base page, your base page, you can't see through it. And so this here is the P. So you can see that I used that, that insert from my thing, and I lined it up, and then I just traced around it. You see how it made such a lovely, nice curve? Then we're going to add the center bits for our M, which were cut out the same method that we used to cut out the V. So stick that right there. That's the bottom. And I love how your brain fills in the letter. You know, it's the negative space and there's a photo in behind, but your brain can still see the letters and figure out the word. And then this one in the center. And then I just have some photos that are going to go in the extra space in between. That's why I made my letters 4 inches high, so that 4 by 6s could fit. So you're going to have basically 3 rows of photos. And I also have the little schedule of the day. But I have left a spot where I want Julia to write some journaling, her thoughts on the day. And we're going to add those in as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the space here, like that. And then this is a photo of Julia actually smiling beside her artwork, and you can see all the easels in the gallery. It was quite a happening place. There we go, stick that down. All right, and this is the spot I'm leaving for the journaling. So this is the technique. Now, we've already been on for quite a while. I will go ahead and put together the second page and show you how it turns out so that you can see it, and I'll post those photos. But that is the idea of turning a negative into a positive, and I'll also discover what happened to my missing photo and stick that under. I've left it without adhesive there so I can do that. Alrighty, I hope you guys enjoyed seeing that come together, giving you an idea of a technique that you can use to create a fun layout, creating those giant words. That's one of the things in our tic-tac-toe is a large word. So this would definitely qualify for that. You could even do it on the front of a slimline card. You could write out the word, like if you're making a Christmas card, you could write joy, or if it was a birthday card, you could do happy in giant letters using that negative space, put some pattern paper in behind or a photo, and I think that would be super cool. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing that. I hope it gave you an idea of a method that you could create this sort of overlay, making a positive out of a negative, and we will be back on at 11:30 for Chat and Craft. We'll see you then. Have a great day. Toodaloo. Bye.